Well, welcome to Church 360 Ledger, Ministry Not Math. This webinar will show you how to easily manage church finances with Church 360 Ledger. My name is Peter Frank, and I am the manager of Concordia Technology Solutions. You'll see my contact information on the screen. Please feel free to send me a note and send me an email or give me a call if you've got any questions after this. I always love talking with people who are active in the ministry, and I can always learn a lot. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me. So we are going to be going through a webinar today that goes through the details of Church 360 Ledger. So just a very brief outline of what we'll do. We're going to do a complete overview of Church 360 Ledger, and that's the goal, is that we'll show all the different features of the software. So we'll do that as with a tour. I'll start off giving you a little bit of a background as to why we built 360 Ledger the way we did, and then we'll actually get into the software itself. And at the end there will be time for question and answer. So I've got it scheduled. We put it on the registration that'll be about 90 minutes. My goal is to have 60 minutes or so of presentation and allow 30 minutes for question and answers. We've done some of these webinars for a few of our other products, and they've usually come up a little bit short, closer to about 75 minutes. And it's always good to get those extra 15 minutes than to actually be 15 minutes late. So please submit your questions as we go. I will not be answering them midstream because I don't want to detract from what I've got planned, but I will definitely be answering all the questions either in the presentation at the end during that Q&A time, or if we have so many questions that I can't get them done by the end of the 90 minutes, I'll follow up with emails afterwards. So by all means, submit the questions as you go. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what Church 360 Ledger is. So first and foremost, it's church finance software. And I say that it's church finance software because we really have built it for the churches. And so first off, it's intuitive. And I know everybody says their software is intuitive. It'd be bad to make software that isn't intuitive. So I don't want that to just be a marketing pitch or anything like that. I want to make sure to emphasize how much we focused on making it intuitive, and by making it easy to use for the people who do not know finance terms. And you'll see that as we go through it, and I'll point it out. It's not just a standard finance software. It's meant for people who are working in churches, and we know that many of those people are not experienced accountants, and we'll talk about that. It's also secure. And of course, we have all the security built in that manages the data, protects it against hackers and all that. That's kind of a standard. It's with web applications, you've got to have that. But it's also secure in that it tracks all of the actions and provides a very detailed audit trail so that you really can't make any intentional or accidental mistakes. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail too. But lastly, it's focused, and I kept it at one word, focus. What I really want to say is it's ministry focused. It's built for churches, and many of the other finance software that's out there is built for businesses. And so you have a lot of bulk, things that businesses would use on a regular basis, but churches and ministries do not. And so we didn't include those things that were not applicable to churches. It makes it a much more cleaner, fresher approach to it, and focuses the attention on what you as church workers really need. All right, so let's dig into the why. Well, it's all about money. Not really, because in ministry, it's never about the money, and that's what makes talking about the money so difficult. So talking about church finances is difficult. We know that whether it comes from the pulpit or even at the church council meetings. And you know, I've been very involved in my congregation for years, and at our church council meetings, it was always the elephant in the room when we were necking the donations. You know, we knew we were going to talk about it, but everybody wanted to avoid that discussion. Talking about it is difficult, and that's really because every dollar has been donated. It's not like a business where you are exchanging goods or services for money. You know, in a way, you could look at it that way at the church, that you are sharing the gospel message and people are paying money. But if you have that focus, you've got it wrong. The gospel is free. The dollars support that. So it makes it difficult because as we talk about money, we're always talking about the offering plate, and every donation is coming from the heart. And so this is much more important to people than going and putting $5 into Starbucks for a coffee. They expect that this money is going to further the mission of the church, further the proclamation of the gospel. And so it becomes that much more critical. So because everything is coming from the heart, because there's purpose behind it, it means that stewardship of these resources is absolutely critical. And stewardship is a word that's thrown around a lot. And usually you think about money. I want to clarify, I don't like talking just about money with stewardship. Stewardship is valuing the resources that God has given us and using them to the best of our abilities to further his gospel. But that is so much more important when it comes to the money in the church, because it is hard-earned money that members are giving to make sure that that gospel continues to grow. So with stewardship being important, that also makes accountability critical. Accountability is so important because there's so much temptation to do wrong with the donations and the resources that a church has. And we hear about it on the news more often than we'd like, of church workers who start off with good intentions falling into the temptation and doing bad things, and cheating the church out of their resources and taking money away from it. And so we understand that that is the reality of living in a sinful world. And that's why accountability is so important to us and why we focus on it. All right, so I pulled this picture up for accountability. I don't know why it made me think about it. I think it's the openness and the conversation. So what does accountability look like? Well, accountability comes across, at least in our software, in Church 360 Ledger, it comes across in two ways. One is preventing ill-intentioned people from doing wrong. So those who really want to do wrong, who want to embezzle funds from the church, how do you prevent that? Well, we know that with sin, you cannot stop sin. You can help prevent it, but Satan is strong and he's working in the lives of our people. But you can take steps to help people not fall into temptation by doing that. And so we looked at it from that perspective of how could we make it so that everything is tracked and that it's known that you can't change anything without somebody else seeing that. So that's part of it. But another part of it is kind of a bit more on the positive side. It's preventing the well-intentioned from making mistakes. And I focus so much on the negative side of accountability and trying to stop the bad things from happening. But there's this other side of it where there are good and faithful people who could unintentionally mess up the church finances because they don't quite understand it. And so accountability and making sure that our churches are good stewards of their resources is helping them not do that, and helping those who are not as knowledgeable still go about finances in the correct way. So let's talk about it at the church level. How do you do this kind of accountability apart from software? Well, in the congregation, there we go. How do you do this in the congregation? In the congregation, there's often many people involved in the finances. And so I've kind of outlined that here. So you have a bunch of ministries, and hopefully those ministries have volunteer ministry treasurers. So if you have the ladies' aid at your congregation, there may be elected officials, if you will, within that group. So one of those would be a treasurer who kind of manages those funds. Now that treasurer manages the funds of that specific ministry. And if you are blessed as a congregation, you might have a paid finance coordinator who works with those treasurers and makes sure that all the bills are paid on time and that everything is properly accounted. Now, I think this is probably the most common thing you'll find in a church, or the most common role is an elected church treasurer, and somebody who the congregation has tasked with overseeing the finances as a whole, and working with those others, the volunteers, the paid finance coordinator. But then that person as well, that elected church treasurer, is accountable to an elected finance board. So you'll have one person who's the point, but you have others that are there who are looking out for them and helping in the tasks, not just there for accountability, but for support as well. And so in an ideal scenario, you'd have these different roles filled by people who are all well-intentioned, and they can help hold each other accountable and support the mission of the church and support the proper management of finances. But we also know that that is not the possible scenario in every congregation, because many congregations just don't have the number of people who have that skill set, or even just the number of people to do that. And so it starts to become that you pick and choose which one of these that you have, or you don't even get to choose. It's just a matter of who you have in your congregation. So we understand that. And here at CPH, at Concordia Technology Solutions, we have people from all different walks of life, from different congregational backgrounds, and so we can look at it from that perspective. So let's talk a little bit more about how we've designed Church 360 Ledger. Well, first and foremost, it was designed to increase accountability. I mentioned that before, that we track everything and have this detailed audit log. So we have built in this accountability within the software. We've also designed it to prevent mistakes. And so, on that positive side of accountability in terms of helping people do church finances correctly, that's how we've built the software, is to make sure it's as easy and simple to use, even if you don't understand the difference between a debit and a credit. And believe me, for those of you who may be actual accountants, you think that's very difficult for people not to understand, but I'm sure in your experience, you've seen how few people actually truly understand that. So we went about doing this by focusing on two key personas, and we have a lot of meetings here to talk about what we want to do with the software, especially at the beginning stages as we're developing it. And I always wanted to point out that there's two people in my mind that I was thinking of, and the first one is this gentleman right here. Now, not actually this gentleman, this is stock photography, but he looks very nice and friendly and kind of matches who I was thinking. So I was thinking about my church treasurer. And my church treasurer is a retired gentleman. He is an experienced accountant. He, at our congregation at least, he had been a controller at a local hospital, and so he had been used to running large organizations. And what we've found in our experience with congregations is that that's usually who they default for the treasurer, is finding somebody who's done this in the professional world as a career, who now has the time to serve the church in that way. So we know not everybody has an experienced accountant as a church treasurer, but it is much more common than you might expect. So this church treasurer oversees all aspects of the church finances. And so he's deeply involved, and he cares about the details. He's not just looking at it from a high level. Accountants are very particular about everything being right because it's so important for things to be right. So this person, this church treasurer, cares about the details, and he also relies on that audit trail, because he can't be there for every single decision and then making sure that everything is entered in correctly. He needs to be able to review it after the fact and be able to find the mistakes and correct them if there are any. So that's on one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, I think of this lady right here. Now, this lady, again, is a stock photo who I think portrays the personality that I'm looking for, but when I think about this person, I'm actually thinking about my mother. My mother is a willing volunteer. Now, at her congregation, she assists with the church finances, which was kind of surprising to me, because growing up, she was never really a finance kind of person. You know, she managed our checking account at my family's bank account that way, but she came from a publicity background. She's a copywriter. She's not a financial person, but she is a willing volunteer. And so this type of person knows how to balance a checkbook, knows how to enter transactions into the system, and most importantly, cares about the ministry. So while finances may not be exciting to this person, to this willing volunteer, they care enough about the ministry to know that they have the time and the attitude and enough knowledge about finances, even though they're by no means an expert, but they have enough knowledge to help out in this capacity. But while they're doing that, they don't want to make a mistake. And we see that with many of our customers who call in and ask for help, that they say, you know, I want to help out with this. I have the time to do it. I just don't really know what I'm doing, and I don't want to make a mistake. And that's why we're here to help, but we can do a lot of this to help people without them having to call. And so that's what we focused on. So as you balance these two different personalities, these two different personas, it creates this nice spectrum that says we have to be able to meet both of these needs, keep that tension there to say that our software can accommodate each of them. So Church 360 provides the accountability they both require, and it's those two sides of the coin of accountability. All right, I hope that makes sense. So Now let's talk about how we're going to look at Church 360 Ledger. Well, we're going to look at a real life example. I really want to tie this back to the ministry. I think it'll make it a lot easier to understand. And so it's a real life example. It explores all areas of the software. We talked about this being a complete overview, and I don't want to detract from that and focus on just certain areas. So in my outline, I've got it that we'll look at every single area of the software, and we may not spend a significant amount of time in each, but at least give you an idea of what Church 360 Ledger can do. So as we're doing this, I want you to put it in the perspective of your ministry. How can I use Church 360 Ledger to support my ministry at my congregation? And I think that'll lead to some good questions as you're thinking about your specific scenario. I think it'll really help tie it back to this ministry purpose. This is not about the finances. This is about supporting the ministry of the church, and that's what makes it so important. Let's talk about a real life example. So the real life example that I'd like to go to today is the idea of starting up a cancer care ministry. We started one at my congregation a couple of years ago, and it's really doing well. And there's a lot of reasons that it is doing well. First and foremost, it's a support group. And with there being so many people who have had cancer, and even more who have had members of their family have cancer, it becomes so important to create that community, that support group. And so that's what the focus of this ministry that we're going to be talking about today is it's going to be about supporting those who have experienced it, either themselves or in their family. It's a great ministry because it's both in-reach and outreach. It allows you to connect with the members of your congregation while at the same time reaching out to your community and inviting people in to talk about something that's very real and personal and connecting it with the gospel. So this kind of ministry does a lot of things. One of the things it does is distributes resources. So as they go about talking with people and trying to bring more people into the mix, they're distributing resources, and resources comes with expenses, comes with costs to develop and print and share that. And so in order to do that, you also have to there we go, requires publicity. That's the next one. So as you're distributing these, you need to make people aware of it. And so there's legitimate expenses that come with this ministry. And in order to pay for those, you need to be able to accept donations. And so that's why I chose this, is that it touches on a lot of these areas that I think are really practical in real life. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'll go ahead and switch over into Church 360 Ledger. I'll sign in here. And this is our interface, and hopefully you can see, and I can zoom in a little bit. It's a little bit too large for my personal taste, but I think that'll probably work out better for all of you who are watching. We just released a redesign of this, and so if you've seen this before, it might have changed a little bit since then. Really the structure and the location of everything is the same. We've just updated some of the colors and the fonts and the icons. Give it a little bit of a fresher look, and it matches our other products a little bit better. So this is the general account view, and this is kind of the default view where you can look at your accounts in its entirety. You can look here and see that these are the four types of accounts: assets, liabilities, income, and expense. And those are key financial terms that you can't get away from, but I think as we go through it, it makes it quite clear what these things are doing. So up here under this cog is the settings, and we're going to start here today. So we'll take a look at a couple of these things. There's some general settings where you can enter in your church name, your customer numbers applied there, and if you call us, that's always very helpful to do that. You've got your check style, and we'll talk about that later on, church address and phone number, and that's to help. That goes in printing out the checks and some of your reports as well. There is a place for you to manage your books. So under here, under settings, you can go to books. And what I mean by books, we've only got one book right now. This is just what we're calling our general books. If you're an organization that has multiple large ministries under your umbrella, so for example, if you're a church with a school, you may have separate books for the church and the school. And you can switch between these books real easily going up here to this top and switching there. So That doesn't affect everybody, and I understand that. And in some churches, even without a school, there are going to be different books, or maybe the LWML group, the Lutheran Women's Missionary League group, or the Men's Club may manage their own set of books. And what's nice about this is it allows you to have these different books, but they have that's tied to the same account, the same users, the same payees, and it just separates them. So it should always be part of the same ministry, but there may be different books that go with it. All right, so what we're going to do next is, we're going to go over here to the chart of accounts. And the chart of accounts is set up for this book, and we've got, you'll see this listing here of assets, liabilities, income, and expense. We're going to go ahead and create accounts for this cancer care ministry. So you'll see here at the Bank of Central Trust, we have a checking and a savings account. We're going to go ahead and create a branch of this for the cancer care. So it's going to be the same Central Trust checking account, but there's going to be restricted funds for the cancer care ministry. Cancer Care Ministry, and we'll go ahead and submit that. And you'll see now all of a sudden it's created another fund here. So it's another account. There's the unrestricted funds and there's the restricted funds. And as a ministry leader, I'm sure you understand how important that is to make sure that those funds are dedicated appropriately to the right groups. So there's your Cancer Care Ministry. Now under liabilities, this is the money that's owed, and you can see here where it comes with payroll tax deductions, everything like that. We're going to create a brand new kind of category, and we're going to call these credit cards. And credit cards is a touchy subject within congregations because you don't want to get into debt. But the reason we're going to talk about this is for demonstration purposes first and foremost, but also for the paying of things and allowing volunteers to have access to the funds associated with the congregation without having access to the actual checking account. And so we're going to create a new one, and we're going to call it the Cancer Care Ministry Credit Card. And we'll submit that with a 0 beginning balance, and we'll move this over here a little bit. There we go. So now it falls underneath credit cards. I'm going to go ahead and save changes. I want to show what this looks like before I get too far. So I've rearranged accounts or categories. I've created one new credit category, one new restricted fund, one new unrestricted fund, and a new account created. So I'm going to confirm those changes. All right, now let's go, and you'll see there my notification that it was updated. Good. Now we'll go into income. So you can see all of the different ways that the church receives funds, and it may be from offerings, and they've got it split up into more categories, so funds and general funds, mission fund, youth fund, you've got education, different ministries, miscellaneous. You also have some other income here, and interest and investment income, fundraising income. However you choose to set it up, these are just examples. So we'll go ahead and create another account. We'll put it under the ministries for the Cancer Care Ministry. So I'm just going to create an account. We're going to call it the Cancer Care Ministry donations, just to kind of separate it. Now you can put an account number in here. If you're already using accounts, you'll want to make sure that you tie them together for historical reporting purposes. You don't have to have an account number. The name is what separates it. But it's always good to, from a financial perspective, to be able to identify it. And so we don't lock you into any specific format, whatever works best for you. So we'll go ahead and submit that. And let's go ahead and move this up here, drop it over a little bit, and it's going to be there under the Cancer Care Ministry. And now that I'm up there, I'll go ahead and enter in the fund 0305, just to give it that number. And then expenses. So under expenses, this is the money that's going out and how you track that. And so what I'd like to do here is create another category, and you can stack as many categories as you want. Categories are basically repositories of accounts. And so if you just have a category like up here, church expenses, under the building expenses, you see that is the sum of all of the accounts below that. You can't actually charge that as an account because it's a category. So you have to go to one of these specific ones, but it'll total up for you, and you total up there under church expenses, so you can add more and more as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a category. I'm going to call this category Cancer Care Ministry. And then let's see here. We'll submit that, create a new account. And at their monthly meetings, they have refreshments. So we're going to track refreshments as an actual account. You can see the difference here too. If it's a category, you've got this darker line over on the left-hand side. If it's an account, you don't. So put that under there. Let's add a couple more accounts. And we're going to call this next one Advertising, because we are going to do some advertising for this Cancer Care Ministry. And this next one is going to be Resources. And that's what we're going to do to, that's where we're going to track anything that we pay that we're going to utilize in those monthly meetings. So maybe it's a video series or a leadership book. So move that over here, and then we're going to add one more, which are handouts. And these are resources that you'll hand out. And this is more just for examples of how you can quickly create accounts and plug them in under your categories. And so we'll go ahead and save that. So one new category created, 5 new accounts, the 4 here and the 1 under income. And we'll confirm that. And that's about it. That's how easy it is to add to your chart of accounts. And so it makes it very clear. Most likely your congregations have a chart of accounts already that you could import in here. And if you're going to change it, I highly recommend doing that at the beginning of a fiscal year, as I'm sure just about every other accountant would suggest. All right, well, let's go from here and enter in the budgets for these accounts. So we'll go over here to budgets, and you'll see that it'll show you all your funds. It'll take a second to load because there's a lot of data in here. And you budget for your income and your expense accounts. You don't budget for your assets and liabilities because that's where the actual money resides. But how you manage that money is not as well planned out like a budget is, whereas a budget says how much money do you expect to come in and how much money do you expect to go out. And so that's what we're going to do here. So here's our Cancer Care donations, and how much do you expect to come into this ministry. So you when you click on one of these, you can begin entering actual numbers. You can see here that you could choose from a previous year budget or a previous year actual and pre-populate all those numbers. Now, with this being a new account, there's going to be no data in there, and so we can't utilize that. But if we clicked on like women's ministry here, you'll see that those numbers are different, and you could pre-populate your budget with one of those, or you could create brand new numbers. So we give you some of that helper information, and that's where as you use this year after year, you'll gain some additional value. All right, so we're going to go through and we're going to put in $50 a month, and we're going to go do that until we get to October. And we're going to make a big push for donations in October, and let's just say we're going to do $450. And that's because that's Cancer Awareness Month, and that makes a lot of sense to really push forward there. So that gets us to a $1,000 donation, a nice round number. All right, so that's the budget that we've assigned in terms of income. Now, under expenses, there's a lot that we could do with expenses. So down here at the bottom, here's the Cancer Care Ministry. We'll go back over to the beginning. So here we are in January for refreshments, and let's just say $15 a month for refreshments. And if I didn't type so fast, it might be a little bit easier. So let me be a little bit more careful on that. And I'm doing this all with the keyboard. I just quickly type the number and click the arrow key, and I can go next. I can go up and down with those arrow keys, and each one opens up the budget box for me so that I can see exactly how much I have. So I'm not going to plan for advertising dollars right now. I want to be able to show some of that. Let's go into resources and just say that that's $25 a month for resources. And you see how it quickly totals up everything as you go. So that's good. We'll budget $480 for Cancer Care Ministries. I don't know how much I'll spend on advertising and handouts. we won't take the time to put that all in today. But that's how easy it is to add your expense or add your budgets in. Now, if you're like me, and I'm a big Excel person, you can go and export this to Excel. I forgot to show you at the beginning, you can change all of these to match either last year's budget or last year's actual. And that's really great because it gives you a great starting point. You're not starting off with a bunch of numbers. Most of this was pre-populated for us today, so that made it easy. All right, I do want to show one other thing in here. So you'll see here, here's the fiscal years. And you can see that right now we're under 2016. I could change it to one of these others, and it says January 2014 to December 2014. Now that sounds pretty straightforward. Like, when fiscal year 2014 be January to December? Well, not necessarily, because churches have various beginnings for fiscal years. So under their under settings here, you can go to fiscal years, and if you want to change your fiscal year midstream, I don't know too many people who do it, although it does happen, you can choose to change the starting month of your fiscal year, and it'll adjust things accordingly and create a short fiscal year, and then your future ones will be like that beginning at the new month. You can also lock down previous years, and so this would be where you'd go in and lock it down. And so this is kind of your year-end process, if you will. One of the things you want to do is, after you've got your books complete, you lock it down so that nothing else can happen to that year. And that's just best practices, and we make it very simple for you to do that. There's a couple other things here in setting that I'm going to talk about. So imported transactions, if you use Paychex payroll software, which many of our congregations use, and especially within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, that's what many are moving to because of the connection with Concordia Plan Services. You can import your payroll file from Paychex here and automatically track those transactions in Church 360 Ledger. There's also the benefit if you have Church 360 members, where your imported transactions, your offering donations, will come in and show up here under pending transaction as a potential deposit for you to do. And so those totals from your batches will show up. You can assign it to funds, and it makes it really easy to create those deposits from your weekly offerings. So I wanted to touch on that. We're not going to go into that in any more detail than what I just did. But if you have any specific questions about that, I'd be happy to answer that later on. All right, let's go into permissions next. So we've created our accounts, we've created our budgets for this. We do need to give some management to that. And so underneath permissions, you can see that there are different permission groups, if you will. The one that's default is the administrator. But let's create a permission group for the ministry leader. So the lady who leads our ministry at Salem, her name is Susie. So I'm going to just use Susie's name for this to say, how would we give Susie access to view her funds for the cancer care ministry? Well, let's call this a ministry leader right now. I could really narrow that down and call it the cancer care ministry leader, but we may want to repurpose this. And if there's no difference in permissions, there's no reason to have different permission groups. So first off, under management, Susie doesn't need to manage the tenant, which is this entire account. She doesn't need to manage her chart of accounts, but she probably does need to print checks. We'll want her to be able to create deposits, create payments, transfers, checks, journal entries, and probably edit transactions, though you can leave that off. We're going to use the administrator view today, so I won't worry about that. But then you can say here, can this group see all accounts or just a subset of accounts? And we're going to say see a subset of accounts. And this is how you give ministry leaders access to just what they need. And that goes back to that idea of accountability. One, to prevent somebody who is ill-intentioned from doing anything with accounts that are not their responsibility, but two, to prevent people from accidentally doing something with accounts that are not their responsibility. So we'll go ahead and submit, and we've created that new permission role. And it tells me, yep, it was created. Now we're going to go back here under settings and go to users. And we'll create a new user. It's based on email address. And you can see there's my test one there. I'll go ahead and I'll just create another one here that is just susie.test@cph.org, because we're not going to do a real one. We'll put her under ministry leader and then account access. And we can say here, let's just give her access to the cancer care ministry accounts. So let's see, cancer care ministry credit card and cancer care ministry donations. And let's see, we had refreshments as one. Oops. Actually, I think expenses are allowed, so we'll just leave it at that. And those are the ones that she can access. And so you can choose which accounts each ministry leader has. They're still just a ministry leader, but you can pick and choose, and you can always go back and see which ones they have access to. So that's very useful. All right, so that's about the bulk of what we're going to do here under settings. We touched on the chart of accounts, budgets, fiscal years. We'll look at reoccurring transactions shortly, but yeah, the last thing on here is payees, and we'll look at that as we go through transactions too. So that was more just a review for me to make sure I'm not missing anything from my outline. So let's go back here, and anytime you click on that ledger button, you can go to the home. Now we have an account selection here, and what you do is as you type in, you can see your entire chart of accounts here, and you can quickly jump to any of those funds. So you see here we can go to expenses, cancer care ministry, handout, and it shows this whole list of your kind of your breadcrumbs to that account. And you can quickly get back to it and navigate. And each time there's any sub accounts in here, you can see that it's right there. So you quickly back up and go from there. Now, if there are transactions under it, you'll see this chart that comes in. And the chart looks a little bit different depending on what type of account you're in. So here under assets, this is our actual dollars that we have in the bank account. You can see how that changes over time. You can narrow it in more to the actual bank accounts, the checking accounts, down all the way here to Central Trust, and there's our Cancer Care Ministry. And that we have nothing in there right now. So this view makes it really easy to navigate across your different accounts. Anytime you need to, you can export to Excel or print and change your date range. We give some predefined date ranges like the year, the quarter, the month, or you can customize it and pick it right there. And that just lets you filter your view of transactions down below that. And so we've got a lot of different transactions here for this church that we're using today. All right, well, let's start doing some transactions here. So we'll go to assets, and we'll see under Central Trust and checking, we have our unrestricted funds and our Cancer Care Ministry, and that's starting off as 0. Well, let's go ahead and create some, and let's do a transfer. And so we are going to do this as initial funds for Cancer Care. And I went over that very quickly. Let me save that. Sometimes I go too fast. It's so easy for me. Up in the top right, you've got your transaction button. And you can see the different types of transactions. Now, the experienced accountants who are listening will understand that every transaction is essentially just a journal entry that shows that you're crediting one account and debiting another. Well, that's great for those who know how to do that, and that's what journal entries are still on there for. But if you want some defined paths, if you will, that kind of give you a little bit of help saying, I want to do this action like transfer, limit the accounts that can be transferred from. Well, transfer, you can say, you can transfer from any one of these. We're going to start off by saying unrestricted Central Trust checking. So this is where our money is that we pay our regular operating expenses on. So we select that, and now all of a sudden it's an asset. Well, it's not all of a sudden an asset. All of a sudden the title changes to asset, and you can only transfer to other assets. So it locks down that transaction so that you can't accidentally transfer funds from an asset to an income, because that doesn't make a lot of sense if you're trying to do a transfer. So we're going to go ahead and transfer $500, and you'll see that it creates this balanced transaction here. It says, okay, you're going to have $500 on this side of the transaction. Where are you going to put it? Well, it goes over here and to the Cancer Care Ministry. So now you have this T-chart, if you will, that accountants are very familiar with, that have your actual accounts and your credits and debits, but the person doing the transaction didn't have to think about, am I crediting this account or debiting it, and what about this account? It creates this nice balanced transaction for you automatically based on some common English. I'm going to transfer from this asset to this asset. So it makes it real simple. So let's go ahead and save that. And now we have that transaction. And we'll go in here to Cancer Care Ministry. Oh, and you know what I did? The date was wrong. So the reason it's not showing is because I still have it filtered to 2015. If I go to 2016, you'll see there it is. It'll go back up to Central Trust Checking, and you can see now that we have those new balance totals. So Cancer Care Ministry is $500. There's my transfer right there. It's showing both line items because I'm at the level of Central Trust Checking. By the way, this little arrow here allows you to hide some of that extra boxes in case you want some more screen space. So because there are only two transactions, I can't show the graph. And what I'm going to do next is go here to this transaction, and I'm going to edit it. So if you click on it, you can edit the transaction, and let's take it back and pretend this was actually at the beginning of December. And I can put in an amendment note, and I say, entered wrong date. And I click Save there. And now it's, let's see, transaction was edited. And we'll go back to 2015. Cancer Care Ministry. Let me do a quick refresh. All right, well, I did something wrong there. I wonder, actually, I must have missed it. I don't think I can change the date. I was not planning on actually editing a transaction at this time, so I threw myself off a little bit. But we'll keep going. Let's go ahead and create a different transaction. I'll go through that again and say that was as of December 1st, 2015. I'll have to double check what I did wrong there. So we'll transfer that, and we'll paste that in here, unrestricted, $500 for the Cancer Care Ministry as of December 1st, and we'll save that, and that's what I was going for. We have all of our transactions in here for 2015, and I wanted to be able to show the holistic view. All right, well, there we go. So we've transferred our initial fund and brought that over. Now, if you well, let's go ahead and make a deposit. I want to get into how to do a reoccurring transaction. So let's say that you had a kind donor at your church who decided to make a deposit or make a donation to the Cancer Care Ministry. So we're going to go up to New Transaction, and this will be a deposit because you have somebody who has donated the funds. So we'll say that this is just a donation for Cancer Care, and we're going to put this in, and we'll make sure to go back here into December and do December 3rd. Now you can choose the payee if you want to. Now Ledger was not designed to track donations and provide the statements for donations. That's done in Church 360 members. But if you wanted to track it, you can, because it's just tying a transaction to an actual account here. We're going to skip that for right now, and we're going to say that this is going into the Cancer Care Ministry, and we'll say $250, and then the income, which I can scroll down here and find Cancer Care, or I can begin to type and it will filter down for me. So now I have the deposit, which is saying it's going to an asset, I'm tracking it as income, and it balances that for me right away. Well, what if this donor said, I want to do this on a regular basis? And you can say here, make reoccurring, occurs every single week, other, third, fourth. You could say month or year. So let's say every single month on the first day of the month. We're going to go ahead and get that. Maybe they created an automatic deposit using Vanco Donations, one of our partners, and you'll know that that's always going to be here, and you just want to make sure that that transaction is easy to track. So you'll save that in the reoccurring transactions made, and then on the first of the month it'll show up here. So then you can go here under reoccurring transactions and see that that is happening at the first of every month. And you can go in and edit this. This is essentially a transaction template, and when the first of the month arrives, then you can see it up there in your transactions. So let me go back here, and I'm going to go back to the Cancer Care Ministry. I do want to complete an actual deposit, so we'll put this here in donation for Cancer Care, and go back here, December 3rd, and it's going into Cancer Care Ministry. This will be the first time they have donated. We'll put it in there, and now we'll go ahead and add it. I want to get some transactions added. So now you can see there's a graph because we had the initial transfer on the 1st of December, the deposit on the 3rd, and now we've got this nice little view to show us that that balance is changing. So that's great. Well, let's talk about payees now, because you, as you're supporting this ministry, as you're having expenses, you will be taking money out of this. That's why you have these donations, is so you can spend it and support the ministry. So we're going to go up here and we're going to create a new payee. And we're going to call this payee Office Express. So Office Express is not in there. I start typing, I'll add a new one. So we'll say Office Express, and that's in 5638 Main Street in St. Louis, Missouri, 63118, and it's 800-325-2399. And we just put a note in here. This is for flyers and brochures. Go ahead and submit that. It allows me to create another one. We're going to be doing another one later on for Facebook. We're going to do some Facebook advertising, and their actual address is One Hacker Way, which I thought was so funny when I looked that up. And Menlo Park, California, 90425, and I do not have Facebook's phone number, and that's okay, and we can just say this is for Facebook advertising. So we'll go ahead and submit that. All right, we'll close out there. And you'll see there's Facebook. So these have been added as actual payees. Well, let's go and create a new transaction. This new transaction view is it will be accessed from anywhere. So let's say we went and printed off some flyers for our upcoming our December meeting. So we'll say we're going to write a check for Office Express. So flyers for upcoming meeting. And we'll put this back in December as well. Let's say it was a weekend, and the payee is going to be Office Express. And I don't know the check number at that time, and that's okay. It's coming out of our Central Trust checking under Cancer Care Ministry, and let's say that it was $50. Now, this is for flyers and handouts, or we could call it advertising. Let's call this one handouts, actually. And so you can see here that it's for $50, and that goes under the handouts expense. And you have that all here. So you can choose to make a reoccurring transaction, but we're going to just go ahead and save this as a single check. The check was added to your print queue. This is one of our cool features. So you go up to your print queue, and you can see here that this check is waiting to be printed. We knew it was for exactly $50. It's not a transaction until we actually print the check. And so we can go here and click on the checkbox and print it, and it's going to give us this check template. And you can see the check is up here, pay to the order of Office Express for $50 on this date, and then these are the stubs that give the details of it. Now, if you there's two types of checks that you can have, and that's what we had shown before under your general settings, where you could see whether it's a top check or a middle check. We work with a company called Forms Plus Inc. who prints these out for you. They've got some great prices. They got discounts for new customers, so I highly recommend you do that. But this gives you a preview, and then you can go in here and print from there. But we're not going to do that today. You also see that up here you have your print queue that says how many you actually have. So that's what you've got right now. We're going to back up. Let's say that you are not printing your checks from here and you have an actual checkbook. You can mark this check as printed and just say that it was printed, and it says it'll be removed from the print queue. And so now that's gone. So now let's go back to our Cancer Care Ministry and that asset, and you can see now it's gone down a little bit because our balance has gone to $700. And so you can see those different transactions taking place. Now, I mentioned before that we've got Facebook advertising that we were wanting to do. Well, Facebook requires you to put a credit card or a debit card on there. We're going to go with a credit card, and that gives me an opportunity to show liabilities. So we're going to do with a new transaction. It's going to be a payment, and we're going to say it's going to be under a liability. And so we're going to put under the Cancer Care credit card. So the memo says Facebook advertising. We don't send them a check. So that's where payment comes in, advertising. And we're going to go back into earlier in December and say December 8th is when we paid it. We'll put it for Facebook. And Facebook advertising, if you haven't done it, it's fantastic because you can actually announce your ministries to people in your area. And so you can target to specific geographic locations and tell them about your cancer care ministry. So we're going to say we put $45 on that. And we're going to call that over here under advertising. And so we're taking it from the cancer care ministry credit card. We're crediting it, we're debiting it under advertising. If that doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't matter because it actually is accurate because we've built it in that way. And we'll go ahead and hit save. All right, and now we'll make sure, I think I did put that date in right. I hope so. Transaction was created. Or did I put that under the 2016 as well? Oh, I'm still under the asset account, which is why it's not showing. All right, let's go back here under liabilities, credit cards, and you'll see my transactions there under Cancer Care Credit Card Ministry. So put it into the right place. I was just looking under the wrong place, but that allows me to see that now in my liabilities, I owe $45 to a credit card. I was able to get that transaction correct, but I still owe that money. Well, there's a couple different ways to it, but before we get in there, this is where I wanted to show editing transactions. Let's say that I accidentally put in the wrong amount, and maybe it was actually $54, and I'll put that in here, and I'll just say that it was a typo, and I'll go ahead and save that. And now I've changed my amount. I've edited the transaction, which is a very good way to have some fraud on your accounts if you want to edit your transactions and pretend like it was for more than it was. Well, we don't allow you to just edit transactions without creating that audit trail. And you'll see here that it tracks my edits and say that it was edited for this amount. And it was actually originally $45, and I have that edit in place. And so you can't do that and hide it. It'll always show that. So that's one of those things that we put in place to keep accountability high, to track all of those different changes. All right, now let's say we're going to go ahead and pay off that credit card. So we could go and do a check and say that we are taking it from our cancer care ministry and paying our cancer care credit card, and we're doing that amount. You could also look at it as a journal entry, and you can say that this is going to be, let's see, paying credit card. And if that's a Visa, I don't think we put that in here, but I do believe I can just type in Visa credit card. Now I do have to create it over there. So we won't put in a payee at this time, but we'll say that we're taking it from our cancer care ministry assets. And this is where you have to think about it. So you're taking money from an asset and putting it under a liability. So you're going to debit the $54 and credit that account. And so we are making a balanced transaction. We're essentially transferring the funds, but it says a journal entry, and we're going to save that. And I think I did do that on the wrong date. Didn't I do that? I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have. And so if we go under 2016, there's our journal entry. If I want to go back here and say, well, show me all transactions from December 1st to, we'll say, November. I'll just do the end of January here. So over the last 2 months, you can see there's where I paid it because I didn't put a December date like I probably should have. And so now we have that balance of $0. And if we go back here under the assets and find that, we can also it's easier to go up here and click on Cancer Care Ministry. You'll see that that's where that came out. The memo for paying, it came out there. And it keeps that running balance, and all the dates and everything is right there. So there's our initial transaction we made today, that transfer there. So it keeps that running. Let's move forward now. So we've looked at all the different types of transactions you've got right here. When you go to an asset account, you will have bank statements that come in, and you reconcile according to your bank statement. So you'll notice there that when I go back to this actual checking account, it says reconcile. If I go into Cancer Care Ministry, I can't reconcile that because it's a subset of my checking account. So only asset accounts are reconciled, and you'll go in here and you'll click reconcile, and you'll go into this green reconciliation mode. And we wanted to make it really clear. We kind of joke that it's the Hulk mode because it's that same color green. But we wanted to make sure that this was a very different mode that showed you what you were doing. And these are all the unreconciled transactions. And so it looks like the last time it was reconciled, it was in at the end of November. And so those are the transactions that you need to reconcile. What you would do is you would look at your statement and see what was the starting balance of it. And so maybe that was $2,595.58. And the ending balance, and we'll pull that up here, and the ending balance is $198,429.13. Chances are it's going to be different than what you see here in terms of all the outstanding balances, because you probably would have received it at the end of December, so it would mark it at a certain point, but for demonstration purposes, we're just going to leave it at this. So it tells you that you need to find the transactions that total up for a difference of a negative $2,166.45. So on your statement, you would look at your bank statement and find those transactions, and as you find them, you check them off and say, that's on here, that's accurate, that's on here, that's accurate, and you just go through until it all matches. Now this is very simplistic. Like I said, not everything is going to be this straight, this clean and straightforward, but that's why you reconcile, so you can find those differences. You can find any mistakes that you might have and see what you need to do to correct those mistakes. So you're going through one by one, fixing all of that, marking them in here, and it looks like I probably had that off on my totals. So where was my initial balance of $500? There you go. So it actually on the statement, it would show that before this, before the $500 that I have on this last transaction would have been $200,095. So I've put all those in, and you can see here that if you want to tally it up, if you want to check even more so, you can look at your statement and see, okay, how many checks were there, how many deposits, how many journal entries, and you can match those numbers up there. Again, this is all just to help you match up your bank statements with your accounts, making sure everything is accurate. Go ahead and save that, and now all of a sudden these transactions have this lock on here that says they have been reconciled, and so you can't do anything more with them because you've confirmed that the bank accounts, so the bank statements matches what your accounting system has, your general ledger here in Church 360 Ledger. I know I went through that very quickly. I'm realizing our time is getting close to that 11 o'clock mark, and so I wanted to be respectful of that. But if you have any other questions about that, please let me know. But we try again to make it as simple as balancing your checking account at home. You're looking at your statements, you're looking at your transactions, and you're just matching them. There's a few things in here, and we won't go into great detail, but under here, under this little notebook there, we've got the different reports. And these are the key reports that churches need for reporting their finances. So the general ledger actually allows you to just see all of the different transactions that have occurred, and you can filter by the different types of transactions, and you can filter by the different payees. And so if you want to go and do just the Facebook transactions, you can see exactly what was there. And there you can see under my transaction that I've got the original one, and then I've got the correction transfer. Oh, there, that is a typo that I changed it, and so that's the type is a correction, and so everything is listed there. And if you want to do print these or export them to Excel, you can do it by that. You can filter by as many of these different things here, type, pay, account, as you'd like. So that's your general ledger report. Your statement of income and expense is exactly that. It shows all of your income and all of your expenses, and shows you what your budget was, what your actual, and how you compared to actual, what you're off. I know that at my congregation, we got these at every church council meeting to see where we're at, and occasionally we'd put them in the bulletin too, just to let the church know the financial health of the congregation. The chart of accounts is very similar to that in that it shows the starting and ending. It's a little bit different in that it's the starting balance at the time frame, the ending balance at that time frame, what was debited, what was credited, what the change was, and it shows all of your different account types. And you can see there, you can just look at assets, liabilities, income, and expense. And then lastly, your balance sheet, which is like that view, but just with assets and liabilities, and it shows your assets less your liabilities to show what you actually have in terms of financial assets in your congregation once you subtract those liabilities. So those are the key financial reports that you would need, and as you see here, they're customizable based on date and everything else. If you, I didn't show you that print, you click here and it'll go into a print preview mode, and you can print it directly from your browser window. Okay. I want to highlight this event log here. The event log goes back to that idea of accountability. As you're looking at all of the different things that have occurred, you may want to know when it happened, who did it, what the type of action was. And so we've got that here. And you'll see that all of these different actions that we've taken have been tracked. So, we have, as we created the created the different accounts, each one of those has been tracked, and it said exactly what date and time and who did it. You've got the different transactions that you can go to and view and see who did those transactions. You can see here, this is the edit that I've made, created a new transaction, which is this $9 difference, a revision of this transaction, which was the original one with the typo. So it's all tracked automatically. You can see that there's no way that anybody can make changes to your finances without you knowing who it was, when it happened, and what they did. Here's the reconciled 39 items. There's my reconciliation report. I forgot to show that earlier. You can go ahead and print that report if you want to attach this to your bank statement and show that you did reconcile these transactions. So those are the key things there. I believe we have covered everything. I know that we are right at that 60-minute mark, and so we'll be moving into question and answers. Let me go back to this main screen here. I'm going to switch to my PowerPoint and put up my contact information. If you can't stay around for question and answers, and I can tell you there's only a couple, so we won't be here for too long unless more come now, but there's my contact information. It's peter.frank@cph.org and my phone number. The software sales line, if you are not a customer already of Church 360 Ledger and would like to learn more, you can contact our sales team there, and they would be happy to go through a personal demo for you as to how this could apply to your church. And so you can talk with a salesperson one-on-one. I would encourage you to start your free 37-day trial at 360ledger.com. And you may be saying, well, that's kind of funny, 37-day trial? Well, that's because if you want to try it for an entire month, you won't have all your financial statements in by the end of that month. And so this allows you that extra 7 days to reconcile your accounts, your bank accounts, and see how that process works. So looking at it in kind of real time. Now, I will say that the 37 days doesn't quite get you to the end of February, when February is the end of our special promotion for saving $199. So the prices are listed on our websites. All customers are required to pay a $199 startup fee, which pays for all the initial training that you would get. If you purchase Church 360 Ledger, you'll have a period of onboarding with one of our specialists who will walk you through setting it up for your church and give you all the training that you need. But we're waiving that startup fee now between now and the end of February. There we go. So I would encourage you that if you are looking at adding this to your congregation, that you would consider doing it sooner so that you can take advantage of that special promotion. So let's go ahead and talk through some of these questions here. So I'll pull back up my contact information so that you have that on the screen, and then we'll go from there with these questions. So the first one is, can you address the differences between Church 360 Ledger and Shepherd Staff? So that's a very good question. So if we go here to concordiatechnology.org, you'll see that we do have some different products here. Church 360 Ledger and Shepherd Staff are very similar in what they accomplish. Church 360 Shepherd Staff is a comprehensive church management software that not only allows you to track your finances, it also allows you to track your members, attendance, and contributions. That's one of the main differences, is that if you're looking to track that information, that's where Church 360 Members is the correct another equivalent. But the financial side of Shepherd Staff is very similar to what Church 360 Ledger does. And we met with the developers of Shepherd Staff. They're just across the hallway here at CPH, so they're very close, but we tried to make it as easy as a transition as possible. And I didn't show this at the beginning, but if you are coming from Shepherd Staff, there is an import that you could use to import your chart of accounts into Church 360 Ledger, bring over your beginning balances. And if you are not using dedicated accounts, and I see that's one of the questions that is coming up, if you're not using dedicated accounts in Shepherd Staff, you can import all your transactions over into Church 360 Ledger. But I think that's a good chance to answer that next question then is, can you show how dedicated accounts are handled, please? So dedicated accounts are handled in quite a different way in Church 360 Ledger, and it's actually more accurate. And as we've talked with our Shepherd Staff team, they've agreed that that's really a better way to go. So under the chart of accounts, you'll remember that when I created that cancer care ministry, it's under restricted fund. So restricted funds are replacing dedicated accounts. And that's a more accurate way of doing it because dedicated accounts act as a separate thing from assets, liabilities, income and expense in Shepherd Staff, whereas here in Church 360 Ledger, they're combined under assets because that's the actual money is stored in a bank account, but it is restricted for specific purposes like this cancer care. And unrestricted funds there is the balance. So it's your total amount in the checking account less those that are restricted. And we did that for a very specific reason, to make it very difficult to accidentally take money from a restricted fund and apply it to a different kind of payment. Now, dedicated accounts makes that accountability very strong too, but it also creates some goofy transactions as you go. And we've learned that that may not be the most straightforward approach. We get a lot of support calls about dedicated accounts and how to handle those. And so that's why we made that change. So I am not as well versed in how all of the dedicated account transactions and Shepherd Staff go. So if you're looking to move and you've got some specific questions, our support team is really the best one to handle that. They're very good at Shepherd Staff, whereas I am not nearly as good as they are. So there's that question. The other questions that was on there, is there a feature that will help you reconcile bank accounts? And I did show that before. Whoops, let me go back to here. Again, it's only related to asset accounts and actually at the account level. You'll see here under Central Trust Checking is an actual bank account, whereas these are subsets of that, just how the money is restricted. And you can go in here and reconcile that. And so I know the question came up before I showed that. I do appreciate you asking that, and hopefully I answered that thoroughly enough in the presentation. One of the next questions is, can you save customized views or parameters for reports? At this time, you cannot. We are looking to add that into the software. What we found is generally the date ranges are the things that are changing frequently, and so as across the different reports. So you'll probably do it like on a monthly basis. In January, you'll have all of your actions go to January, and then you'll go and print the statement of income and expense. And for the most part, that's worked for our customers, although we have had suggestions to have those saved reports, and that is on our roadmap to accomplish later on this year. And that would just allow you to save certain filtered views. So if you wanted to, let's say, save a filtered view on General Ledger that was only in a specific account, like your cancer care, you could go in there and let's see where it was. I think I went past it. Well, we'll just use ministry as an example, that if you want to just show that, we'll be able to save that. So that's coming up later on. All right, so the next question, what safeguards are in place to prevent people from applying money from restricted funds to the general fund, especially for budget purposes? Well, that's a great question, and one of the ways we do that is here under that transaction view. So let's say you're making a deposit and you're wanting to take out money from your checking account to pay for it. Well, we've split that checking account into two different areas, and one is unrestricted and the other are the specific restricted funds. And so if I remember right, there was 200,000. Let's do a very large amount for that. So if you have an unrestricted amount and you put it in here, it will not allow you to, well, actually, maybe I had more than I thought. It won't allow you to go over that amount for the assets. So yeah, let's see that. So it does prevent you from taking money out of that restricted account by always making you select that, one payment, always making you select that specific unrestricted amount rather than that restricted fund. So I hope that answers that question. The follow-up was especially for budget purposes. Well, budget doesn't quite apply there because the budget is applied to the income and expenses. And so how you track that will be on the other side of that transaction. So you budget for income and expenses, and you can see where you're at there. A budget is just a goal. It's not a specific cap or restriction. That's where you want to end up. The real cap or restriction comes in on where you're taking the funds out of it. And so that's what we showed here. All right, can you print a trial balance at the end of each month? And Joyce, you asked that question. I'm not sure I quite understand the question there, if it's a trial balance. What you can do is at the end of each month, if you go into your chart of accounts or your balance sheet, depending on if you're looking at all accounts, and you set it for that specific month, you can see here where your overall balance is as of that end date. Maybe it would be better to show, let's see, December time frame. So there's December 1 through December 31st, since that's finished. You can see your ending balance as of the end of December is right there. So if you do that before you reconcile and make any adjustments, you can go ahead and print this, and it's as of that date. So I think that's answering your question. If not, I do apologize, and please follow up with additional details. But the reports are based on the dates that you select in the system. Well, I believe that is all the questions we have for today. Let me go ahead and switch back, and I realize now that they're making some construction noise outside my office. I hope that's not distracting to you all. There is my contact information, peter.frank@cph.org, and my phone number. If you have any additional questions, please follow up. If you'd like to start your free trial, get a live demo, you can visit our website. And like I said, that's 360ledger.com. Thank you all for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. I did enjoy presenting that, and I look forward to speaking with some of you in the future. Have a great day.